Okay, we're recording. This is this is Steampunk Star Raisin of AmberStreet.com, and this is episode 2 of the podcast. The world is a mess, and I just want to steampunk it. And I'm here with Daniel Bertazon, and this is July the 8th, 2020. How are you, Daniel?
I'm doing good. I'm hanging in there.
That's good. So welcome to the world is a mess, and I just want to steampunk it podcast.
hmm
I um, I am your host, Steampunk Star Raisin, and I'm here with Daniel Bertazon from Daniel's Star Trek. So, what's on your mind today, Daniel? What did you want to talk about?
Well, I just want to talk about the state of the world and how it's in right now. It's really messed up. I mean, you got like how everything is. You got massive poverty. You've got like the coronavirus going everywhere, killing thousands of people per day.
Yeah,
And like
there's
you know what?
three dangerous things going on in the state of the world today. Um,
Mm,
it is, the coronavirus being the foremost because United States is spiking when it comes to coronavirus figures. We're at an all-time high for the number of infections because we started to reopen here in the United States. You're in Canada. How is it in Canada?
it's it's not that good. It's not that good, but I think it's a little bit better than America.
Yeah, America, because we got an idiot as president. We've got Donald Trump, who's a narcissistic egomaniac. The only thing he's a genius at is marketing. He's really good at marketing, but he's got 41% of Americans fooled into thinking he's doing a good job, and he's not. We're up to 130,000 American deaths. It'll probably be double that by the time this is over.
Yeah,
But
because like you said, it's coming back with a vengeance, right? It's
yeah,
mutating.
it's coming back with a vengeance. We're having another spike in the coronavirus, and it's actually worse. The spike is actually worse than it was when it started in March. But the that's part of the problem with the world events today. The second problem is massive unemployment in the United States and a global recession and an economic depression in the United States. I just checked the unemployment rate in Canada is only 7%, but in the United States it's like 20%.
Yeah,
And you have about 45 million unemployed. They've done rent extensions and stuff like that, but that's running out of June.
hmm
So people's mortgages are going to get foreclosed on. People are going to get evicted, and you're going to have tens of millions of homeless.
yeah,
$1,200 stimulus was issued to every American one time only, and that's not enough to. It might pay your rent for 1 or 2 months depending on where you live, but like here in LA, they won't even pay 1 month's rent because the average
hmm
cost of rent here in Los Angeles. I live in North Hollywood, which is a neighborhood in Los Angeles. Um, is the average rent is like 1,600 a month.
yeah,
So that might buy you some groceries. It slightly alleviates the pain, but it's not going to alleviate most of the pain. And the third problem is I know that there's escalating tensions between the United States and China with trade war, with China imposing tariffs on U.S. goods and U.S. imposing tariffs on Chinese goods. And you basically now they're talking about banning TikTok in the United States because TikTok is a Chinese company, and because supposedly TikTok shares all of its user information with the Chinese Communist Party. And I know that in the United States, they've arrested some executives of Huawei, which is a computer manufacturer, cell phone manufacturer, a really good Chinese company that manufactures Chinese electronics. So we have kind of like this Cold War going on with China, and there's border tensions. And I think like a week ago, maybe a little bit longer, there was a border conflict between India and China the first time since the 70s, where like 20 soldiers got killed. Um, and if China is a nuclear power, and so is India. They have missiles and they have nukes. If they go to war with each other, that could be bad for the world. It could drag the whole world into World War III. So yeah, 2020 is turning out to be a total crap year. Um, but yeah, So yeah, I mean, and then you got in the as far as with the coronavirus, you got President Trump who's actually pulling testing. Um, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, okay. It was muted. You muted your video too, but um, anyway. So anything else you have to say about that? With the state of the world? With any
It,
other?
it, it really does suck. It just seems like it's getting worse and worse all the time, and yeah, like oh boy, no, and it's like nobody cares, nobody gives a crap, like even
Well,
people's
everybody's
morals
got
are,
their head up their own ass,
yeah.
and they got their head in a bubble, and they're oblivious to the suffering of their next door neighbor or anybody nearby, and nobody trusts anybody, and we're very fragmented as a global society. Um, but yeah, particularly here in the United States, Canada seems to be a little bit better off than the United States,
Hmm.
but because the social services, social safety net's a lot better there. You don't
Yeah.
see the level of homelessness in Canada that you do in the United States. You don't see the level of poverty in Canada like you do in the United States. We just and it really pisses me off that like Kanye West got stimulus money. I can't even get a small business loan. I went to my bank, tried to get a small business loan, and they were like, "Well, we will only give small business loans." This is Wells Fargo for
Hmm.
existing business customers. And I'm like, I am an existing customer. I have a checking account here. Oh no, you need to be a business customer. So the $2 trillion stimulus is a joke. You got all these wealthy billionaires pulling out millions of dollars. Kanye West got between $2 and $5 million, and you got Kim Kardashian bragging on Twitter how she bought 14 ponies. I mean, it's just things are everything's so upside down. Things are sick. I mean, yet Trump, who is basically a supreme, he's not only a supreme douchebag and a fascist, but he's probably the most corrupt president we've had. As far as him, defrauding customers at Trump University, or defrauding employees that he worked with by going bankrupt and not paying his employees. It's really unbelievable. We have basically a mob boss mentality in politics right now, as far as with the president. He reminds me his behavior very similar to a mob boss. He's got Russian mafia connections. It's been well known, and the word on the street is that um, his Trump's Russian mafia connections are the reason why he was able to get a $2 billion loan from Deutsche Bank, because Deutsche Bank has well-known Russian mafia connections. And Trump, the reason why he won't release his income tax is because he is he is heavily in debt. He's $2.4 billion in the debt. Based on my research, he owes about 400 million to Wells Fargo. He owes $2 billion to Deutsche Bank. Yeah, he owns a bunch of golf courses and the Trump brand, and he owns Trump hotels, but he only has about $600 million of assets. So nobody knows for sure because Trump is very secretive of his assets and he still continues to run his business. He uses the presidency to personally enrich himself. He takes bribes from the Kuwaiti embassy. He takes bribes from the Saudi embassy. Um, but from what I can tell, he's an anti-billionaire. What's an anti-billionaire? Well, he's negative. He's worth negative. His net worth is below zero. It's negative 1.8 billion. And the real reason why he won't reveal his income tax returns, he's the first president not to reveal his income tax returns. And there's a court case going to the Supreme Court, but some people say that it won't be ruled on until after the election. The reason why is because it would show how much of a failure he is as a businessman. He's never been a successful businessman. That was all mythology built up by, it was all built up by, you know, Trump himself doing The Apprentice. He's a reality show star. That's really the only marketing himself and successfully becoming president and being a reality show star are the only things that he's done good. Everything else is shit. Or sorry, excuse my language, crap. Everything else is crap. But I try not to cuss here on this podcast because it can restrict the. But Trump really inspires me. He inspires me to swear because he's such a narcissistic moron. I mean, oh my god. I mean, I could just go on and on about Trump.
Yeah, he's a vulture capitalist, like you said. He's a vulture
He's a
capitalist.
vulture capitalist. He preys on people. He doesn't actually produce or build anything. He leases out his name and he gets other people to pay for it. He gets people to work for him for free, building Trump hotels and Trump casinos. He declares bankruptcy, doesn't pay his bills, and he's able to do this without getting bad credit because he spends it off through a corporate tax ID. He spends it off to a corporation, and if the corporation goes bankrupt, the person themselves or their credit history is not impacted negatively. But it's still, he had a bad track record. He had problems loaning money in upstate New York, and he managed to get connections with the Russian mafia, and he got them to pull strings so that he could get a $2 billion loan at Deutsche Bank. But that's the reason why he's always scamming people. He's got income coming in from leasing out his name. He's got income coming in from Trump hotels. He's got income coming in from Mar-a-Lago and all the golf courses he owns. But he's heavily into debt. This leaves him very susceptible to corruption. And that's why it's important that every president of the United States, because really what the president of the United States does impacts the world. I'm not going to say that the United States is the only superpower. I don't believe in that type of propaganda. The United States is one of several superpowers. I would argue that the United States is a superpower. You also have China as a superpower because they are an economic superpower and they have a large military. They got 3 million troops. They got nuclear missiles and nuclear weapons. And I would say Russia is still a superpower. They may be a diminished superpower, but they have a very large military. They have a very strong oil industry. Russia is one of the largest producers of oil in the world. They produce a lot of gold, and they still have a very big economy, and they still have a very big military presence. And Russia still has ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and they still have nukes. And I would also consider India a superpower because they have a very large economy and they have a very strong economy, and because they do a lot of manufacturing in India, and they have a million man army, and they got missiles and nukes as well. You have other countries that are economic superpowers like Brazil. Brazil has a large military and they have a very large economy, and they manufacture, I think, a lot of clothing and textiles and other stuff. But the problem with Brazil is they don't have nukes, so I wouldn't consider them. I wouldn't say that's a problem. I'm just saying that's a feature. They don't have nuclear weapons, so they're not a superpower per se, but they're an economic superpower. And I can also say that maybe Australia is also an economic superpower because they do a lot of mining and manufacturing in Australia as well. Manufacturing opals over in Alice Springs, Australia. I've never been, but I've been to Australia, but never been to
Just
Alice
one second,
Springs.
Steampunk. 1 second. I'll be back. I'll be back. One
What's
second.
going on? How long
I
are you
just
going to be gone?
no, just 1 second. 1 second.
All right. But anyway, yeah, I'll just continue talking. But yeah, here in Australia, they got Alice Springs. They manufacture a lot of jewelry and opals and semi precious stones. There's been a lot of mining for precious metals in Australia. They've been producing and drilling for oil out near Perth. So I would say Australia is an economic superpower. Not everybody benefits from that, but yeah. So you have, I would say, four basic superpowers. I would argue the United States, China, Russia, and India. So who can say for sure? I guess why Daniel Bertizan is taking a break, what I'm going to do is I want to talk about Big Sur. Big Sur or Mac OS 11. I was actually surprised that they dropped the name OS X because OS X was always such a big selling point. They kept coming out with different versions. The latest version of OS X is OS 10.15 Catalina, and Big Sur dropped support for all Macs prior to 2013. So you got to have a 2013 MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, or iMac or better to be able to run Big Sur. Big Sur is not coming out until the fall sometime, probably like September or October. Um, but it might even come out later this year than normal because of the impact that the coronavirus has had on Apple's manufacturing process. Um, but it's going to come out sometime this year, and it's going to have Rosetta 2. Rosetta 1 was introduced in Snow Leopard, and that allowed apps written for the PowerPC to run on Intel Macs. Now that they're going to be phasing out Intel, um, Big Sur has Rosetta 2, which is you're going to have Apple Silicon. And Apple Silicon chips um, are going to be based on like the Apple A processors, the Apple A processors, which are used in the iPad and also used in the iPhone, um, actually score in benchmarks as fast as like a 2013 MacBook Pro. And if they were to run them, they have low energy cores and high energy cores. And if they were to add more cores and maybe up the clock speed and add a heat sink, they would actually run cooler and could run in the same form factor without having thermal throttling issues because um, Intel has failed to produce processors in the 10 nanometer process, and they're still, I think, working on 14 nanometer, and they've been really delayed on 10 nanometer. And there's a lot of issues with Intel processors on thermal throttling, but I don't really think it's a big deal that they're, I don't think with Big Sur, it kind of sucks that they dropped support for all Mac computers prior to 2013. Um, but amazingly, the cheapest Mac that you can get today that will run Big Sur when it comes out is probably a 2013 MacBook Air because it's actually the market's actually flipped. There's a restriction of manufacturing and parts from China, and so that's caused the price of used Macs to go up since the quarantine and since the coronavirus and since manufacturing's been cut off in China and slowed down, and it's been slow to restart, especially with the Chinese New Year. And so, for about 6 months, the United States has been cut off from imports from China for the most part, or it's been greatly reduced. And so, and then there's also the trade war with the tariffs. So, it used to be, why buy a MacBook Air because I could just buy a used MacBook Pro that's a lot more powerful. Yeah, the MacBook Pro is heavier, but now, if you want to run Big Sur, it's kind of flipped. The cheapest Mac computer that you can buy that will run Big Sur would probably be either a MacBook Air or a Mac Mini. Um, the problem with the 2013 Mac Mini is the 2013 Mac Mini does not have upgradable RAM. And
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, that kind of sucks. And the MacBook Air does not have upgradable RAM, but that's not why you buy a MacBook Air. MacBook Air is an uber thin ultrabook. I know because I I helped a client attain a MacBook Air, and it's a very and I've played around with MacBook Airs, and um, they're very very thin ultrabook. And I know somebody that has a 2014 MacBook Air, and it runs just fine. It has a very fast SSD. It only has 4 gigs of RAM. You cannot upgrade the RAM, but you can upgrade the storage. But that's not why you buy a MacBook Air. It's just a thin ultrabook on the go. It weighs a lot lighter than a MacBook Pro. But yeah, Big Sur is actually going to probably kill Hackintosh computers, and because it's going to be moving to a proprietary chip, unless somehow somebody can hack Rosetta 2 and get that to work on Intel PCs. But anyway, but you don't really follow Apple News, do you, Daniel? You're not really because you run a
No,
PC.
no. but I just wanted to, I
But
just
anyway,
wanted to,
getting out of tech news, and it was
yeah.
just one. I wanted to briefly talk about Big Sur and OSX, and I pretty much, in the 5 minutes that you were gone, I got
Hmm.
around to doing that. But go ahead. So what
But
were you going
it's
to
just
say
like
again?
it's like this whole world right now. It's just messed up. I mean, even like even in the home, like even like people's like morals are going down. Like people just don't give a shit about each other. I
Well,
mean,
it is.
like
It
I
is.
went,
We're in economic hard times, and we're in a global recession.
yeah.
America's in an economic depression.
And
Uh,
nobody gives a crap. Like for example, like like um like I told you, like I had some problems. Like for example, me, I had some problems with the police, right? And
I mean, do
the
you really
fucking
want to?
police.
Do you want to talk about your personal problems here on the
Oh,
podcast? Because this is
well,
gonna
no, no, that's fine.
it's
No,
gonna be on
I don't have to.
iTunes.
What I'm trying to say is like this world whole, it's all messed up. It's just all
Yeah.
of it is messed up. Nobody gives a shit. And like there's like a I even like go online and I see like about I see like police brutality everywhere, right? Nobody gives a
Yeah.
shit. Nobody gives a shit. It just sucks.
Well, everybody's got their head up their own ass, so to
Yeah, it's
speak.
like you said, everyone's living in their ivory towers, and it's getting really,
In
really
their own little
bad.
bubble, filtered from the world. They're oblivious to people suffering right next to them. Yeah, I think the future is going to be like Mad Max. How soon that future will happen is hard to say. It could be a catalyst. It could be like the start of a war between China and India that sparks off things where you have a total systemic economic collapse where everybody is just a scavenger, like in Mad.
Yeah, I mean, like, did you hear like what happened to that guy, that protester who like the policeman went on his neck and killed him?
Yeah, George Floyd. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not surprised. I condemn that. I do believe that Black lives do matter, and I condemn the killing of George Floyd. They're trying to say, well, he tested positive for coronavirus, but he was asymptomatic. They're trying to say, well, he had drugs in his system, but he was conscious and he was held in a compromising position, and he pinned his knee on his neck for like 9 minutes and killed him. He asphyxiated him to death. And so, but yeah, the police who were brought up on charges, I mean, it took them like a week before they even brought up the first charges. And originally it was third degree murder, then it was upgraded to second degree murder, and then the other police officers were charged with third degree murder. I guarantee you that if I, as a civilian, went with three of my buddies and put my knee on their neck, and three of my buddies helped hold somebody down, and somebody got asphyxiated to death because I put my knee on their neck, I'd be charged with first degree murder, not second degree murder. The problem I have with I can't think of his name right now, but the police officer who was
George Floyd.
charged with second degree murder is they took a week to even charge him, so he had a week to just like chill, take a break, and then they second degree murder, which means that it wasn't premeditated, but it was premeditated. There's evidence to show that that police officer had worked as a security guard with George Floyd because George Floyd did odd jobs. Sometimes he worked as an adult film star, sometimes he worked as a security guard, and but he was currently unemployed because of the coronavirus. But and so and he may have passed a counterfeit bill, but that's no excuse to murder him. Because what started it was there was a $20 bill that was used to buy cigarettes, and the sales clerk asked him to uh, return the cigarettes because the $20 bill was counterfeit. He declined, and the police were called, and he apparently stayed around in that area, and then that's when the confrontation began. But he did not resist arrest. He was handcuffed, and then he was asphyxiated to death. He was, by putting pressure on his neck. And the problem with the police officer being charged with only second degree murder, that
Third degree.
means that he could probably get out of prison after a couple of years on parole.
He was charged with third degree. That's what I heard. Third
Well, he
degree
was
murder.
charged with third degree, but then they upped it to second degree because of
Oh,
other.
they did. Oh,
What?
oh, that sucks. Oh no, I mean
Well, it doesn't suck. It
yeah,
sucks
that's
that
what
they
I
didn't
thought.
charge. They should have charged him with first degree murder.
Yeah, exactly.
Not
Should
second degree, not third degree, first degree murder.
exactly.
Give him the full amount. I don't believe in the death penalty, but let him rot for the rest of his life in prison.
Exactly. But since he's a cop, he has
He
more
has
authority.
privileges.
He's
He is
got
a privileged
privileges.
class as being a cop, now a former cop because he's been officially fired. But
I'm saying it sucks that he wasn't charged with first degree murder. Like it's just like, oh, but because he's a cop, he's got more privileges. I've seen cops who are bullying people, telling them that they're going to die alone and shit like that, saying stupid, harassing things to people. And you know what? They get away with it, right? They get away with it because they're cops, right? And
yeah,
and, and like if they do it, it's okay. But if if you do it, that's abuse. What the hell is that?
well, it's a double standard. We have this double standard of privileges. Prosecutors don't get named enough. Prosecutors prosecute poor people who are poor and defenseless and not well educated on the law, and um, they often prosecute people who are innocent. Prosecutors often knowingly will prosecute a case because they're looking for the maximum number of wins. They're not looking for justice. They just want to
No.
convict as many people as possible, and they're
Like I
not
was
held
talking.
accountable. They're a privileged class. That's why I have a problem with Kamala Harris being considered for as a VIP pick for um, Joe Biden, is because Kamala Harris had been a prosecutor in California prosecuting parents and grandparents for student truancy, and
Hmm.
she made like a big propaganda campaign, and she talks out of both sides of her mouth. She's a typical politician. She's not trustworthy. There's something that makes me uncomfortable about Kamala Harris. I view her as a corrupt politician. She was a prosecutor, and prosecutors don't get held accountable for when they violate the law. They don't get held accountable when police officers violate the law. They don't get held accountable. Sometimes they do, but they get treated with kid gloves. And we're supposed to be in an ideal society, we should all be equal under the law, but that's not the way
Exactly.
it's worked. It's supposed
Yeah.
to be that way on paper, but there is a legality called de facto law, where the law is it's the de facto law is way the law is carried out, not the way it's written on paper. Because often you'll find that the law is actually carried out way differently than the way it's written on paper. But if nobody changes it or nobody enforces it, then it becomes de facto law. It becomes law in essence, even if not on paper.
Exactly. We were talking about this. Like cops, right? Cops. You know who they were? They're former jocks. Jocks,
Well, yeah,
bullies.
they're your former bullies. Most of your cops are people who like to bully people. They are former bullies in high school, and they were like, "Gee, how can I bully somebody as an adult? Well, I'll just become a cop." But
Mm.
yeah, I've had a lot of run-ins with the police over the years, and they're assholes. You have to tread lightly with them because they they're all about the respect, and if you don't respect me, then that's like a de facto violation of law, and they can just kill you.
Yeah.
And we
Basically,
shouldn't live like
like
that, but unfortunately, that is the society we live in.
yeah.
Hopefully, with the protests over George Floyd, maybe it can lead to something better. We got to get Trump out of office because
Mm.
Trump is going to finish destroying this country. Let me tell you what. I mean,
Yeah.
Trump signed an executive order where he dumped $4 trillion onto the stock market buying bonds. Got the federal government to buy all these toxic bonds and dump $4 trillion in the stock market. So, hey, the stock market's doing fine. Kanye West getting $2 to $5 million. He's doing fine, but most Americans are not doing fine.
Yeah. And you got people like PewDiePie. They're making $1 million a day. Like they make million. Like
Well,
who
I
knows how
don't.
many?
I
Right.
yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm not a big fan of PewDiePie, but
Yeah.
he's not
Like you
doing
said.
anything. He's not doing anything dishonest. He may
No,
be
I mean, like
obnoxious.
he's just sitting in front of his computer playing video games, and he makes money that way. He's a professional video game player. He gets like you said, he gets
It's like,
millions of
yeah,
dollars a
I know,
year.
like he signed a picture with Sony Games. I think Sony signed it. He signed a deal, not a picture, but he signed a deal with Sony. And from what I understand, PewDiePie makes about 7 million a year playing video games. He
Yeah,
often
yeah,
endorses certain video games, and he gets paid for his endorsements. and it's because he's got like, I don't know, a couple 100 million subscribers. I
Yeah, he
lost
got
count.
lucky. He got lucky, and it's stupid. Like there are people out there who are dying because they can't get a job and they can't pay the rent, and this guy just plays video games and makes money just by doing stupid
Well,
shit.
he's not the he's a symptom of the problem. He's not PewDiePie. I don't really have anything against him personally. I don't really, I find his sense of humor to be obnoxious. I can only tolerate a little bit of PewDiePie at a time before it wears on me and grates my nerves. But I mean, that's his own thing. That's just a symptom of the problem. The main problem is just systemic corruption. You have basically con men running the country in the United States, and nobody doing really anything about it. Like you have even the supposed Democratic opposition working in cahoots with Donald Trump. So
Mhm.
yeah, things are not very good right now.
No.
But yeah, I just realized this thing does not let me know how long it's recording. Sorry, guys, I'm still working out technical details with The World is a Mess, and I just went to Steampunk It podcast. But I'm here with Daniel Bertison from
Yeah.
Daniel Star Trek. But
Or Daniel's Hot Topics. I'm Daniel's Hot Topics. Yeah, you can call me
Dan's
that.
Hot Topics. But didn't you also did Daniel's Star Trek, correct?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it just like I want to talk. I wanted to talk about this subject. Like, it's crappy. Like they could bully you, but if you say something in return, like, "Oh, you're an asshole," they'll come and get you, right?
Well,
Like,
life is not fair. Unfortunately, it's not
yeah,
fair. We can struggle to truth is singular, and we can come closer to the singular truth through critical thinking and the scientific method.
yeah.
Um, but
So it sucks,
Carl
really. I
Sagan's
mean,
book, Demon Haunted World, really talks about the times that we live in.
oh, really? What's that
Unfortunately,
book
he
about?
died in 1996. It's one of my favorite books. It's the last book that Carl Sagan published before he died in 1996, Demon Haunted World. He talks about science as a candle in the dark, and he talks about how, we have like really high end technology like nuclear weapons, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and we have the information age. The internet was new when he wrote that book, and he talks about how if we do not, as average citizens, understand science and take critical thinking and skeptical thinking and scientific method into effect, then we will return to the dark ages. And he was also
Exactly.
talking about how the return to mysticism, not just religious mysticism, but also UFOs, psychic healing, stuff that's pseudoscience that's has
Mm-hmm.
no basis in science, no basis in fact. That you have an increasing, you know, large numbers of people who are gullible and fall gullible to stuff because they don't know the scientific method and they don't know how to critically think about things.
Yeah.
And yeah, beautiful book. I recommend buying this book on Amazon. Carl Sagan, Demon Haunted World, one of the best books of all time.
Mm-hmm.
But my
This
favorite
is
book by
why.
Carl Sagan is actually Dragons of Eden. I used to have a
Mm-hmm.
copy of that, but I lost it when I was moving. So I've got to get a copy of that. That's like my favorite book of all time. It is basically a prequel to Carl Sagan's Cosmos.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of Carl Sagan, Daniel?
I heard about him, but I haven't read anything he did.
Well, I recommend. I don't know if it's still on YouTube. Somebody had uploaded old reruns of Cosmos by Carl Sagan on YouTube. I recommend watching it.
Mm-hmm.
90% of what he talks about still applies to things today. We've learned a few things about black holes, and we have we've got more sophisticated telescopes now that can peer deeper into space. We're now actually discovering exoplanets. It is such a tragedy that Carl Sagan is still not with us, or is no longer with us anymore, because he would have a lot to say about what's going on in the world today. And he was just so charming, so charismatic. He had a certain Carl Sagan had a certain elegance to him. He could take science that was complicated and explain it in layman's terms.
Mm-hmm.
He was the host of the Cosmos, which only lasted one season. He was an advisor for NASA. He was an astrobiologist working for NASA. He had to theorize what alien life would be like. He was a consultant. He was a college professor. He was college professor at Berkeley College in California, and all around one of the best people to ever live in history. It's a shame that he died from complications of cancer in December of '96. I did an interview with James Randi a number of years ago. It was like 8 years ago, because James Randi, from what I understand, is in declining health. He doesn't really do public appearances anymore. But when I was at DragonCon 2012, I did an interview with James Randi, which was one of Carl Sagan's best friends. But speaking of DragonCon, I'm really irked at um, Delta Airlines. DragonCon got canceled. They didn't announce it until like the day after 4th of July. I think it was on July the 5th. They announced that they had canceled DragonCon. And so I was able to cancel my hotel reservation and get a refund, but I was not able to cancel my $290 airplane ticket and get a refund. It really irritates me that the airlines, they get federally funded by the federal government every year. They get subsidized by the federal government, and they got bailed out in the $2 trillion bailout, and yet they're so greedy that they will not do a refund when it on somebody that bought an airplane ticket because the convention's been canceled because of the coronavirus, because of the resurgence of the coronavirus in Atlanta, Georgia, and the new all-time high spike that they've had. They've canceled DragonCon, which kind of bums me out. This is turning out to be a total crap year. It's like one of the worst years ever. But I will try to survive and persevere through this the best I can. Have you heard about DragonCon, Daniel?
Yeah, I heard about it. I heard it was
What are
good.
you looking up? You seem like you're bored. You're typing
No,
up
no,
stuff.
no, 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 nothing. I'm just no, nothing. I'm just just looking around and yeah. You know what? Did you know that San Diego Comic Con they're gonna do it, but it's gonna be an at home thing. San Diego Comic Con
Yeah,
at
it's going to
home.
be virtual. They're doing a virtual DragonCon too, but it just. I went to the virtual Anime Expo. Anime Expo is the largest anime convention in North America, one of the largest anime conventions in the world. It was held 4th of July weekend. I went to one of the panel discussions, and it was just really boring. It's not the same as going and seeing people in cosplay, what kind of cool cosplay they have. Can I take your picture? Can I do an interview? It's not the same doing a virtual convention. It's you
No.
getting like maybe 1/10 the experience of actually going to a real convention. So virtual
And you,
conventions suck.
yeah. And you know that because of the coronavirus and nobody working, you know that what they have at the virtual thing, it's not going to be very much, right?
Well, Anime Expo, they called it Anime Expo Light. I sat in one of their panel discussions for a little while, but it was two Japanese actresses that did voice acting, and they were kind of cute, but they, I didn't really understand what they were talking about because I wasn't familiar with their anime. I'm only a casual fan of anime, and it was boring to me. So I left. I only stayed on that for a few minutes. They're doing the same thing with Dragon Con, but it's not going to be the same. And Anime Expo Lite, which was the virtual Anime Expo convention, was actually free. But it might as well be because you're not really getting much content. I wouldn't pay for that. I don't think most people would. And DragonCon 2020 virtual convention is also going to be free. You can go to dragoncon.org for that. But yeah, it's my favorite convention. I was really looking forward to that, taking a break from LA, the grind of LA, and go to DragonCon in Atlanta. But I won't be able to do that now. But anyway,
Yeah, I mean, like this year, there's nothing, right? This year is nothing because everyone is not working. Like the Loki show was like only filming for like 2 weeks before it got shut down. And in 2 weeks, like what are they gonna do in 2 weeks? Like they just filmed at one scene, right? And it was like, oh,
well,
well, Loki was.
it's getting weird because you have a lot of unemployed actors who are venturing into things that they normally wouldn't. Brie Larson, who played Captain Marvel, started her own YouTube channel. Are you aware
Yeah,
of that?
Yeah, I was aware of that, and
And she was just so awkward and out of her element, and I could just imagine what she was thinking. She's like, God, all the Hollywood production, all the TV shows and all the movies have been shut down this year. I
yeah,
can't do any work. I don't need a gap in my resume. What can I do? What can I do? Oh, I'll do YouTube. And she doesn't really know what she's doing.
yeah.
um
And then you got YouTubers
and
who are like
she
ripping her to
said that
pieces.
she was a gamer and she liked to play Fortnite, because there was one of her guests, because she had her video professionally edited. So she's got a production team that's like editing her videos for her. Because she did multiple interviews and there's like jump cuts back and forth. And she did it. And somebody asked her, what are some of the things she liked? And she talked about how she was a gamer. Well, I played Nintendo, but she couldn't actually say any actual individual games that she played. And then somebody asked her, they said, "Oh, do you play Fortnite?" And she's like, "Yes, I do. Yes, I do." And she just sounded, I could tell she was lying. She doesn't play Fortnite. She's an actress. And she claims that she's an introvert, but she's an extrovert. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really have any problem with her um, doing a YouTube channel. I just think that she seemed really, really out of her element, and so she's only diving into YouTube because she can't really get any acting roles right now because all production's been shut down. What do you think about Brie Larson having a
Um,
YouTube channel?
I think that it's interesting. I know a lot of YouTubers like to pick on her and then rip her to pieces and call her SJW trash and stuff. And like, a lot of YouTubers are like saying nowadays, "Oh, this is SJW, that is SJW," but I kind of wonder if they actually know what that means, because
Well, I
a lot
don't
of
have any problem with Brie Larson personally. I think that a lot of her content. She only did one episode, and it was I don't know, it was like 15 minutes long. But a lot of her content on her 15-minute episode of on YouTube um, came off as a little bit pretentious and a little bit artificial and fake. But I don't, do her thing, But she just started a YouTube channel like this month, and she's already got like 200,000 subscribers. So I guess more power to her. She just seemed very, very socially awkward. She seemed very out of her element, very uncomfortable, very nervous to be on YouTube. But she's like, God, I got to do something. I got to fill that gap in my resume. But yeah, but
I haven't seen her YouTube channel. Maybe I'll go and see it sometime. I know a lot of people are making fun of her. Like there's
she's
this.
aged a lot too. Like I noticed that she wasn't wearing any makeup when she was doing her YouTube. I guess she was trying to be real, and you could see a lot of wrinkles in her face. She still looks hot though, but um, she's starting to age a bit. Not that that's a bad thing. It's just it is neither here nor there. I just like, wow, you really shot from the hip when you did this YouTube channel. You didn't have makeup or anything prepared. But I think she's trying to be more personable and more real. But she came off as nervous, unsettled, uneasy, and sometimes superficial and fake. Like I don't believe that she plays Fortnite. I really don't. But you
Yeah,
know,
a lot of people just say things.
because like if somebody were to ask me if I'm a gamer, I would say yeah, I'm a gamer. I play Fortnite. I play Company of Heroes 2. Sometimes I used to play Team Fortress 2, but I got bored with that. Half-Life 2. Um, I would love to play Doom Eternal, but I need to upgrade my video card. But um, because God, Doom Eternal, you got to have like 6 gigabytes of video RAM just to play that game. My video card is like an older Quattro 600 with 1 gigabyte of video RAM. It runs some games okay. I could play Fortnite at 30 frames per second and on low settings. I had to lower my resolution to like 40%, put all my textures in low settings, and then I'm able to, you know, play Fortnite, which is fine. It runs fine. It's not the highest graphical settings, but I at least can run the game. But there are a lot of games that I simply won't be able to run because I don't have a good enough graphics card. But yeah, you can usually pick them up for about $35 used on eBay. Quattro 600, really good economy gaming card. It has 3D acceleration, has 1 gigabyte of video RAM, and has pretty good driver support from NVIDIA. And you can play Fortnite on that card. And granted, you're going to have to put everything in low settings, but you can get about, if you lower resolution to about 40%, you can get about 30 frames per second on a Quattro 600. It was originally meant for like basic AutoCAD, 3D modeling and rendering. That's what that graphics card was originally designed for. It is a Quattro card that dates from like the year 2011, but it's the card that I have. I don't have a lot of money, so I game on a budget, so I can play a lot of games, but there's also a lot of games I can't play. But one of these days, I might upgrade to Windows 10. I'm still running Windows 7 Service Pack 1 with all the security updates because I got Windows 7 Professional and it still downloads security updates. So if you're running Enterprise or Professional Edition of Windows 7, Microsoft is still downloading security updates for that. So, okay.
Mm.
Anyway,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great. And you know what? Like, did you know that? Okay, the San Diego Comic Con at home, they're going to announce something. They're going to put something else in the timeline for Phase 4, another movie or TV show that we don't know of. It's going to be a surprise.
well, I'll believe it when I see it.
I mean, do you think? I hope. What would you want it to be? Do you want it to be Fantastic Four, or I mean, I personally would like it to be Deadpool 3.
Um, I don't know. From what I understand, Deadpool 3 has been canceled by Disney because they don't like the rated R. It it ruffles their feathers the wrong way because Deadpool, now that it's a Disney property, would interfere with their kid-friendly image. So they canceled the X-Force movie, which was supposed to star Deadpool. They canceled that. So uh, I don't know. But I think we've been going on. How long have we been going on? A little over 30 minutes.
Yeah, but like, look, see what I'm
I got to
saying
wrap
is,
this up because I got to keep this. I got to keep
oh,
this short and simple.
okay,
But thank you, Daniel, for being on The World is a Mess. And I
mm-hmm.
just want to Steampunk It, episode 2, July the 8th, 2020. This has been Steampunk Star Raisin, your host of The World is a Mess, and I just want to Steampunk It. You have a nice day, and I will see you 25 billion years. I will.
Yeah, see ya.
All right. And